the other day playing a Metallica limited edition Master of Puppets that I was borrowing from a friend, and the ball kept getting trapped here in the cemetery inline drop section, and pulled up the playfield, and sure enough the inline drop has snapped off. So contacted the distributor in Australia, AMD, sent me a replacement set with instructions, decals and springs, and 3 drop targets. So we'll see how we go. We're going to try to replace those now. So with the playfield up, this is the drop target unit. Effectively, this mechanism, the solenoid resets them, and then every time the drop targets are hit, they come off. So first thing that the instructions tell you to do is to remove the drop target unit, which has got effectively 1, 2, 3, 4 screws holding it in place onto the playfield. Whenever I do anything of this nature, I actually just will first go and take some photographs just to make sure that in the event that I have any issues. This is a pretty simple scenario, but I thought I would follow my practice because it's always a good thing to have a reference. And then the last of the screws holding the mechanism in place. And the whole drop target unit comes out. Now, being a new modern game, the whole unit is actually plugged in with clips. So, able to simply remove that. Again, I'm just gonna, for the sake of being anal, take another picture. Remove all the plugs, Molex connectors off there. So we're ready to go. I've got the instructions. Procedure for replacing targets, inline drop targets. Overview. There are several different flat washers, E-rings, springs. The locations of each one is critical and they are not interchangeable. Please complete the procedure on a clean bench top. Well, this is as clean as mine gets. And pay attention to the location of the components before assembly. Well, that's part of the reason for the video. Please follow the steps. Step 1, remove the drop target from the playfield. So that's what I've done. That's step 1, and then it goes straight. Step 4, remove the other 2 E-rings. So I'm not quite sure what happened to steps 2 and 3, but my guess is that we're going to have to wing it and see how we go. But the very first step, we just need to be very careful that we somehow manage to not confuse the pieces. So the drop target that's damaged is the front one, which is actually the back drop target on the metric on the mech. So I'm guessing that I have to actually take the whole mech apart, unfortunately, to replace this one piece, or I can try to remove these two screws here in the hope that I can get this out without having to remove the entire mech. So let's see how we can go there. Okay, so that's coming off fairly good. I have noticed that it has got lock tightening lock nut liquid on there, so let's just take that. We'll remember to do that when I put it back together. So this bottom one does not seem to be a separate unit, so maybe that is not such a clever idea. So let's try to remove these E-washers with a pointy pair of pliers. So again, I'm using the phone to record the order. Okay, now if only it was the back one that it came off. So that's the first one. And then there's another set of washers. More photos, take those washers off. And there's that set of washers. So we're removing the screw on the end of the shaft. Let's see if that gives us a little bit of wiggle room to squeeze one in there. No. Okay, there's another E-ring that's come off the bottom unit on the inside drop target. There's no extra. There's an E-spring there. I'm hoping that this was going to free up this nut here, but it's not. Let's see if we can grip it before we. So there's another E-washer at the top. Once we've removed on the bottom shank, which turns freely, the only issue is that this nut here is very tight. So we're going to have to grip that with a pair of pliers to loosen that up. The top one came out fairly easily, but the bottom one not so much. So I'm going to have to get something better to grip it with, and a bigger pair of pliers, because the nose tip pliers that I've got just aren't strong enough. So I've got myself some lock pliers, and sure enough, just gripping on that bottom rod, it pops out. So you notice on my bench top. So according to the instructions, which I think I've caught up on now, this bottom rod should just flip out. There is a washer, which is two that have dropped out. So these washers were between the drop target and the plate, with the thicker washer against the plate. So again, I'm going to put that down there, and I can remove that one now. So that rod then comes out. That's the lower rod. So successfully got the bottom shaft out. The top shaft is not budging at all, so I'm going to try to wiggle it free with this, because it's okay. There we go. It's starting to wiggle. Oh yeah. Okay, so that's wiggled, and that's coming out now. So I want to try not to disassemble it too much, so that I can keep the central one in there, noticing where those come out. So you've got two washers which drop up there. Okay, again it looks like the thick one was against the end, and we've got a spring which attaches to the base of the unit, so we're going to remove that and see if we can remove this without having to remove the middle drop target. Okay, so there's the broken unit, and the top shaft has got effectively got an E-ring, a washer, spring, and then another E-ring. So we're going to take the new drop target, getting it the right way around, which is the front one, the flat piece, not the serrated pieces, facing outwards. Place it in. Now I don't know quite how I'm going to get all these screws in, these washers in the right place, but effectively what you can see is I can put the target through and that way secure the spring and the washers on the back of the top rod, so that I can then try and get to a place where I can put those washers that have come out back on the rod. Before I start reassembly, I've got all my bits and pieces because I get a feel this is going to be a fiddly. So I've got my Loctite for the nuts that go, the screws that go back into the rods. I've got all these pieces, and what it says is that order of washers is flat washer, spring, target is important. So you want to have the small flat washer on the side touching the plastic effectively. We'll go from there and work out how to make that all tie together. So you've got a thick and a thin washer for each of these. I've got the Loctite, I've got a spring. I may as well replace it with the new springs. So let me try to get this in place. Okay, that's on firmly. So now I'm going to record the put this one on, so it goes effectively 2 washers on with the thick and then the thin. Then while I've got this up, I may as well put this on as well, which is going to be your thin on the bottom. So it goes thick, thin on the top one, and then just the thin one. Then on goes the target, and we put in a thin washer, a thick spring, a thick washer, and an E-clip. So it's a bit fiddly, but go, that goes in, and then on the other side you simply put the thick washer and the E-clip over the top. So I've got this back together and I've tested it a couple of times. I found that the best way is to get a nice registry rate without possibility of false falling down is to use a thick washer between the drop target and the bracket at the bottom, and a thin washer between the drop target and the bracket at the top. And then at the back of the drop target I use thin washers between the spring and the drop target, and at the bottom I'm using thick washers between the E-ring and the well, at the bottom I've actually got no washer on the first one, but on these I've used, where necessary, thick washers on the outside. But at the top I've always used thin on the back and the front, and the back, sorry, and at the bottom I've used the thick washers between the bracket and the drop target, and that way I'm getting a really good result. I've put it back, put it back together. Now don't forget, when you put your bolts back in, to make sure you put Loctite effectively to stop these from coming loose, and it has a high chance of that coming loose. I'm loving the Molex plugs on these. I'm actually thinking of putting these as standard on any mech that I fix. I've got a whole lot of these, and I'm going to just put these on each and every one. It makes changing things so much easier. I think in my old Bally Williams games I'm going to do that on my any flipper rebuild I do, anything. I think it's a fantastic idea. It just makes everything you can do, all your work at the bench, all your soldering here, and then go and plug it in, off you go. So then look, I'm going to pop this in now. So again, that's it. So it's thin versus the bracket, between the bracket and the drop target. I found that works. On the top one and the bottom one I use a thicker one, creating a slight angle so that when it pops up it just drops in. You can see it physically, the angle of it wanting to go forward. So that's it for me. Thanks very much, and we'll see it when it's back in the game. So drop target, inline drop targets have been reinstalled in the game, replugged in, and let's turn it on. And fire it in the game, all fixed, and you can see just a nice grave. Very good. So that's working great now. So if you like that video, feel free to like or subscribe, or leave a comment if you've got any questions. I will put the manual that I received. I will put the manual that I received on my website, which is pinballevangelist.com. And thanks for watching, and I'm off to continue playing this game.